and we shall record this week so that anyone who misses today. So last week we were looking at quotes, things that we heard in the user research interviews that we did in January and February. These are in the Miro board. You can see them in section 1 and section 2. So last week we reviewed those and we had a good discussion and generated some insights that are listed in the chalkboard to the right. Today, we'd like to go back and revisit some of the assumptions that we had at the beginning of this process. So you might recall back in January, there were a couple of working groups where we sat down and kind of listed out the assumptions that we had or things that we thought we might find. So we'll be going over those, and then we'd like to discuss some actions that we'd like to take and what else we might like to learn. So if you'll navigate to section 3, everyone can access the board, right? So if you'll navigate to section 3, these assumptions are listed out here. We're going to have sort of a similar format to last week, so we'll take a few minutes for silent reading to go through the contents of this section, and then we'll have a discussion. We'll share observations that we have. When the time is up, we'll discuss our observations as a group, and then we're going to pivot, and Sam will lead us into a more focused conversation about concrete next steps that we can take as a project based on what we've learned. So does anyone have questions about what we're planning to do right now? Okay, if not, please go to section 3. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. All right, that was 5 minutes. Sam, do you want to kick off the discussion?
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, everybody. Wonderful to see so many repeat faces. I just kind of wanted to open it up and ask what folks found particularly interesting, what they had questions about, and encourage folks as we're discussing and as you're reflecting here to add some stickies over here on the right. Would anyone like to kick us off?
Yes. When you say auto generation of Docker files, I guess I'm wondering, how did that investigation go? Did that mean like you posed that feature to them and then they give a response, or you give them a proof of concept or something?
Oh, actually, it kind of refers relatively specifically up here to, in this behavior with Docker file section, there's this homegrown automation section. And so it's just sort of like examples of how folks who are using Docker files, some teams have some automation for that day one moment in sort of quite a similar way to Buildpacks do, where they have like a make file, they called it, which helps them to sort of bootstrap the Docker file. And I think the needs and opinions of the team that they're working on.
Interesting.
I had one question, which is, in this assumption that we've validated as false, OSS developers are familiar with OCI image concepts and Docker CLI usage. Given the amount of people that had fairly complicated Docker workflows or were using Docker Compose, I'm wondering, is this false because we've bundled it with OCI image concepts, which people aren't familiar with, or are people using Docker while still being confused by the CLI? Sort of like, how did we get to that answer?
Yeah, thank you so much for calling that one out, because I think that's a super unclear. Let's break it up into two things. I think, and there's also a bit of confusion here about like, what does OSS developer mean? I interpreted it to mean not like OSS developers who are working on OSS, but like developers who are use OSS in their tool chain.
So basically just developers.
Yeah, exactly. And I would actually, yeah, I would switch that to say like, I think people seem pretty comfortable with the Docker CLI, but not with like the OCI image concepts. Thank you for clarifying. Sam, you raise hand?
Yeah, just had a few observations. I mean, a lot of these feature suggestions seem to be from like engineers, which I assume are app developers and not like managing platforms, or they're not operators. And what's interesting to me is that as an operator myself, like there's a fine line between having the ability to customize the images you make versus security. So as an operator, I don't want like app developers who don't know enough to make changes just because they think like, okay, something is not working, I'll just quickly copy paste this Stack Overflow snippet and now suddenly my app is working, versus being able to understand what it's actually doing underneath. And at least from my like original goal as to why I got into Buildpacks, it was to take that like I guess power away from app developers, where they don't have to think about this and they're not making these mistakes. And a lot of these features are, I guess, trying to pull us back into that same space where I want to make all these changes and to my image because my operator didn't let me, and I just want to get my app out. So I wonder how many of these features were motivated because the sample of people we interviewed were app developers versus how many were like operators who are more concerned about security or what goes into the final app image or things like that. Because that would affect a lot of these assumptions that we have here, like what are true and what are false and what are the feature suggestions. If it's all app developers, then I can imagine there being a conflict of interest between what the app developers want and what the operators want. And then I guess we have to decide which way we want to lean into.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think about this a lot, like as you come up with features like inline build packs, right? Like if an app developer can do anything in a really easy way, like there's a low chance that then the bomb is totally accurate, or that everything in the container is secure, right? So we could add a lot of these escape hatches to pack for, you know, some of these more casual workflows, but I imagine most organizations that use this would explicitly not want to allow these features to be used.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but it's probably also good to serve both of those ecosystems because I think people who use those escape hatches have a higher probability of eventually be like writing build packs or kind of doing those things where when you're first working on something, you just want it to work. And then you kind of deal with how to do it properly afterwards.
I guess to me, the existential question is the second half of that ecosystem, the people who just want it to work and don't care about these things. Does Buildpacks have enough to offer to them that even if we unblock them, they'd be interested in it? Like maybe the killer features of it appeal to the first audience.
I think Paz as a whole proved that point to some degree, right? Like the fact that Heroku was bought at all or was a business, I think proves the point that I mean, it is geared towards. It was not originally built around kind of the security stuff, even though that was part of it. But I think what made it popular was not like, oh, sweet, it's secure, my app's secure. It's like, oh, sweet, I can deploy a thing to the cloud and it can get out of my way. I think there is a part of that even for containers. That's if there is a healthy ecosystem of build packs and things that is curated and whatnot, like being able to, I think like the Spring Boot example, right? It's like being able to do a thing, not have to write Dockerfile and have a container that is my Spring Boot app is still highly valuable.
I guess should we focus on like expanding the ecosystem of good build pack authors versus providing escape hatches to app developers who don't know what's happening underneath? Because if you're removing this abstraction layers from build packs that you've built upon two separate responsibilities and giving the app developer like the control of build packs, like you have this, you end up with this really complicated API that an app developer has to learn. I guess you can obviously make them simple using something like inline build packs, but then again, you still have to know that okay, there's something called a launch toml, there's something called a like this is how I set processes, this is how I set environment variables, and you add all that craft for this extensibility versus you just like put more effort into expanding the ecosystem of good build pack authors creating build packs that the users can then utilize.
I don't disagree with well, I guess I think you need to do both, but I do think the escape hatches are important because at least from my experience with kind of V2 build packs as well as like if they're stuck and the options are to stop using it and not continue, like I think there has to be a path for those people to kind of keep going. And on the complexity, like, I mean, I feel like people say Docker files are simple, but like, I think it's because people have learned those things, but like, you know, you had to learn the difference between like command versus entry point and like how to set this stuff. And I do think build packs are more complex, but I do think people have learned some of the complexity around Dockerfile as well. Like multi-stage Docker files aren't simple of how you need to do it in a structured way, right?
I think for me, the comment about platform operators and app developers potentially being at odds in their desires, it kind of like, now it seems obvious, but like I feel like that's why we tend to get a lot of feedback that our documentation is confusing, right? Like our website's hard to follow. I think it's because we're trying to speak words that will appeal to everyone. You know, when maybe we just like the language that we're using is like, maybe it should be different for each set. That's all.
I don't think they always have to be at odds. I mean, at the end, the operator wants the app developer to have a seamless experience when creating container images. It's only when it comes to extensibility and security that app developers don't want to care about that. And operators want to care about that a lot. That's the only point of friction I find between like having the ability to customize everything versus having a smaller surface area for attacks. What I also found interesting was that like there's this point around users expect reproducibility on local versus CI. Like from personal experience, I've found that to be a major pain point of app developers where they were trying to do something locally and it didn't work out the same way on the platform once they deployed it. So I'm also surprised that that was like not a true assumption.
I definitely don't. I think the unclear sections are really more. It's probably confusing to have this didn't study and unclear. I think it's probably didn't study for all of those unclears, honestly. So that's great. That's helpful for you to provide us that context. Thank you, Sam.
I was supposed to start a timer at the beginning of this section, but I forgot. So I belatedly started one. I think our goal was
No
to
problem. I'll take it. I'll take it from here as long as I'm not breaking up too much. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this stage in the process, we've kind of like we've gone through most of the findings. We've gone back to our initial assumptions, which actually, came out of a session quite like this, where we were brainstorming, what do we want to learn? And one of the things that is really important for me, and the reason that Natalie and I decided to do this session this way, is that we really want you all as participants, stakeholders, maintainers, contributors to the project to really define the next steps and use your knowledge of the code base, use your knowledge of our users, and to really decide what action should we take based on what we've learned. So I might actually pull a little bit of an audible here and ask for maybe a quick 3-minute brainstorming session and ask folks to write down what action do you believe we should take based on what we've learned. And an action might be something around what do we want to learn? What more do we want to learn? An action might be something around what do we want to explain better that we have today? Or it might be something new that we want to build or explore building. So would folks be up for that? Does that sound good? All right. So I'll set a little timer here for 3 minutes. Uh-oh. Do you know how to do it? You know how to do it better than me now. Natalie, do you mind setting it? And yeah, use the chalkboard space over here on the right. That's your workspace. Yeah, throw down as many ideas as you have in 3 minutes, and then we'll talk more about what we've learned and what we actually want to take forward. Okay, great. No, I think I want to ask maybe let's kind of go around in a circle a little bit here, and I'll sort of prompt folks to share, and you could either talk a little bit about an action that you wrote down that you think is interesting, or something that someone else wrote that you think is interesting, or sort of going back up to the top here around some of the topics and possibilities we discussed last time. I'll drag those down here. So yeah, and if you feel so bold and you want to commit to an action and say, I will take this forward, would love to hear that as well. So why don't we start with Javier. Gotcha.
What? Me? Feel like I wasn't paying attention in class. All right. So the one that I wrote down Actually, no, I'm gonna focus on the one that I found really interesting. So there's this one right here where it says better error messages debugging for app devs, right? And it talks about error messages, and it kind of like points to Rust's examples there. And I think we've talked about this in the past, and we've acknowledged that this can be improved, but we've never really taken any action on it. And so I don't know, like I just want to kind of point it out, like it would be really, really nice if people didn't have to go elsewhere to search for information, right? Like it would be nice if, you know, like detection failed, right? And it didn't just tell you detection failed, right? Like it told you like, this is why detection failed, right? It gave you like some hints to like either where to go look for documentation, like even just pointing to a URL where we could manage and explain that better. Or just kind of give as much more detail as possible to try to troubleshoot that on your own. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I wrote that partly because of like I was motivated to write that because of two factors. So like typically Buildpacks look at files or environment variables. If we could somehow expose that metadata in a way that platforms can understand that, okay, this Buildpack looks at this file or this environment variable when it's detecting things, we could provide better error messages or even suggest Buildpacks to users. So like if you find this file in the application directory, you can say, hey, we found this Buildpack that looks at this file. Maybe you're interested in this Buildpack. So that's like promoting the ecosystem with some extra metadata from, let's say, the registry or something. So you could build like an index of environment variables or files that the Buildpack looks at. And the platform could use that information to enrich the detect process. And that's sort of where I was going with this.
That's really interesting. It reminds me of like VS Code, right? When you open up a file and it tells you like, hey, did you want to install this plugin for this file format, right? And obviously it's doable if you think about the registry having additional metadata and then just being able to query the registry in some form or fashion, and then just be like, we found these 3 build packs that might help or something.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a part of the normal detect process. Maybe like if the detect fails, you say that, okay, like none of the existing builders or build packs you're using are detecting your application. Do you want to do some extensive search on the registry that for build packs that may detect your application? Then it runs through a search, suggests like, hey, I found these build packs. Do you want to try any of them? And then vice versa, if it finds certain environment variables or file set, which the build packs in your existing builder do use, it can say that, hey, this was like a slight typo or a spelling error, or it expects this to be one of these enum strings or whatever. It can get crazy, I imagine, but I wonder if we can expose some like more metadata from the build pack to the platform so that it can do these sort of things.
This is, I think, maybe only slightly related, but it came into my mind as we were talking. Which is, I think, a while back, someone on our team suggested the idea of a dry run for pack, where you could basically just see the build pack that would get generated, build plan that would get generated. So you could see what order the build packs are running, what dependencies they're requiring. I feel like sometimes it's a little bit of a mystery, and maybe just like with explanation of like, as much as we can provide, of like, here's how you read this plan, right? And like, here's what is going to happen, so that it's more clear. I don't know. It's only slightly related.
I wonder if we could add in some of our results, like ways to, for build packs, be more self-documenting. Like if when you return your detect result from your build pack, if there was like a optional reason field where you could describe either why you detected or why you didn't detect, then the lifecycle could sort of like bubble that stuff up.
Some super cool ideas here. Just for the sake of time, I want to move us on a little bit. Juan, did you have a sticky you thought was interesting or that you wrote you want to share?
Well, I put this one where, I mean, one of the things that makes sense for me is when I watch some previous videos when Buildpack was presented in some conference and stuff. I saw like 2 or 3 of them, and usually the way we present the product was, okay, what happened when you have this bunch of applications running in containers, each of them with different OS versions and with different dependencies and stuff. And for me, that was key to understand that people love Docker files, and in companies, they love it because, I don't know, you can do whatever you want in that with one line, and that's great. The problem is when you have several applications running in your infrastructure and then you want to patch them or do something with them. And I think that sometimes we try to compete with the other Docker file, or not compete, but we are against with it. And I think that the customers or the users don't know that when they start using Docker files and they start growing, they can have a problem. And we are trying to solve that problem. So why we can make that problem very clear to the people that comes into our website and try to understand what we are doing. So put that clear, because I can be a startup and I want to do it, I want to put my product faster in the market. But if I don't start in a with good practices and try to avoid problems in the future, probably I will face it. I can say, okay, I'm a startup. I will care about that when my product gets success. And there are companies that already have the problem, and I don't know if they can go to our website and says, okay, I have this problem. Yes, I'm running many applications and containers, and I have this issue when I want to patch them and whatever, right? And we are not saying that. So that's why I said I put this one, if we can make that explicit, right? If somehow we can say, we are trying to face and to solve this problem. And if you like the Docker file, that's okay, go ahead, but you can have this problem if you grow, and I want to help you. So why don't you come with me and try to use it and avoid having these problems? Or if they don't realize that they have it, maybe they will say, yeah, I didn't notice that I have that problem and you can help me. So yeah, that's the one I put there, and it was related to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have a comment on that or an action that we might take? Now we can also move on to the next person. Joe, did you want to share?
No. Sorry, just kind of jumping in late.
Sure thing. How about Terrence?
Yeah, I put the note in about escape hatches. I think when we've talked about them in the past, it's always been about the app devs, but I think it's interesting to also think about, like, do operators and kind of our other users, right? Operators and Buildpack authors also kind of need escape hatches for being able to do stuff that they feel restricted by kind of the system and stuff we've built in place today. And kind of what are the kind of the easiest things we can do to enable these folks to get what they need to get done without feeling like they're kind of trapped in the system.
Yeah. But from the build pack author perspective, is that right?
Or operators, right? Like we talked about how we have multiple classes of users, but I feel like a lot of the escape hatch conversation from last week was centered around the app dev, right? The app dev being stuck because they couldn't do this thing that they could easily do in Dockerfile.
Right. Right.
And so kind of want to turn it on its head a little bit.
Yeah. What really interesting suggestion. When you think about that app operator persona, what are you imagining some of those situations where they might need an escape hatch might be?
I know we've mentioned this for I think app devs, but I think maybe some of the kind of stack pack conversations that Joe has brought up in the past from folks like Red Hat and others of just like not being able to have this functionality kind of blocks their adoption of the product. I know on the VMware side, historically, there was the kind of TLS SSL CA cert stuff at one point, but then figured out kind of workaround for things like that.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point. Emily, do you want to share?
One of the things that stood out to me is just how much of the value prop is dependent on an ecosystem of great build packs. Even the things that are some of the success points rather than the pain points, like my dependencies are always up to date, and I get a bill of materials. Like we provide tools where build packs can create that, but it's not happening unless there's an ecosystem of good build packs that are doing it. So I wonder if we need to do more to support build pack authors in helping them write good build packs, and then make them feel like they're getting something out of it. Like if they write good build packs, well, say something nice about them, and sort of we depend on them, but we could help them as well.
Yeah, if only there was a sub team that did that work, Emily.
Yeah.
Are there any
Yeah, I guess-
specifics? Yeah, go ahead.
Also, just kind of jumping in on that point, I wonder if like at a lot of our working group meetings, I feel like we don't have a bunch of, I feel like there's a lot of additional people that write build packs that don't turn up to those. I'm wondering if like having this project be more accepting of build pack frameworks, right? And the libraries people use to write build packs, kind of giving them a way to have those enter into the build packs org would make them kind of more involved in our entire process and like have some of their needs rise to the surface more easily.
I did start an RFC for creating a build pack sub team. That could be like a good place where folks could come and have discussions like that without having to listen to us like bite chat about directory names. And Terrence has taken it over. So hopefully we're making some progress along those lines. And then that would be a place where we could adopt tooling into the project if that was appropriate.
Yeah, I imagine the sub team sync for that kind of, or the meeting that comes out of the sub team sync there would be a good place for people who aren't even necessarily contributors to CMB. Like I don't think it should be a requirement that like if you work, for instance, on Packet, that you need to be a CMB contributor, right? Like I think it would be much more open in that sense. There's I updated Emily's draft if you're interested, Dan, on there. But one of the points I put for the goals was this kind of comes out of the Heroku playbook for language owners, but like advocating for build pack authors, I think is a thing that is a responsibility of that sub team. So also bring up concerns that, that would come out of that group of people.
Great. What's the name of that new sub team?
Build pack authors. or Buildpack author?
I think I just said build pack to be symmetrical with platform.
Oh, do you want me to change it back?
Oh.
I felt like Buildpack was just so generic. It's just like it's like when people
Yeah,
complain
they're trying
about
to
how
call
the
it
project's called.
Buildpacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
that
the
makes
one sub team to rule them all.
sense. Mhm. Yep.
Next up in my queue is Sam.
Sorry, did you say something?
Yeah. I would just, in case you had a sticky that you wanted to share, I know you already got to talk a little bit about your error messages one, but
I already did, but like that's pretty much all I had to say. Like around having the ability to find build packs that your application needs might be like something we should look into. It's not always obvious that, okay, this random build pack on the internet would work for my application. Being able to surface that would be great.
yeah, totally. And I think one of the really interesting things about your comment is about helping them find it and helping them find it in the context where they're experiencing the error, where they might be able to resolve it that way. Totally. Yael, did you have, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. I'll take something. I mean, we talked about it also both today and last week. It's about documentation. I think that many of the topics that are here relate to the fact that our documentation is not that great. I'm not sure what's the best way to improve it. I mean, how to start, where to start, because there are so many things that we can improve. It's starting from the fact that people are getting errors that they're not sure how to resolve them. And if we would have like a page of common errors and where to look, what to do, or even the error message, as we already talked about, can be better. And also for new people, like our website, I feel that it's not good enough for new people that would like to start being more familiar with Buildpacks. So, I mean, like an intro page, where to start, what should I read if I care about this or that? Because, like, as I already said, like the website is like for everyone, and like we need to like to make people like be more focused on specific things that they care about.
Yeah, when you talk about improving the website, is there a particular persona or scenario where you feel like it has some room to grow?
I'm not sure I feel that like for every persona we can make our docs better. There is always way to improve, and mostly I think that like for new people it's very hard to know where to start. I think that even if we can like, I think that we have 2 people that are here like joined our community like in the last month. We can ask them what is missing. Maybe it will help us understand where to start.
Awesome. Anthony, did you have a sticky from the chalkboard you found particularly interesting, or an action that you shared that you'd like to talk a little more about?
Well, I'm definitely biased. I'm just saying that right now. I did want to, I did have my one sticky here about an interaction mode for pack. I think there are a lot of good points about things that are blockers today, right? There's not a huge ecosystem for build packs, and maybe it's hard to write one. I believe that. I believe the documentation maybe is not fully comprehensive and accessible. I believe that as well. I guess my trouble is that I don't think people are complaining enough about it. I think, it'd be better for me if there were more complaints on a consistent, like, daily basis about that, right? And to me, the problem is, there's this inherent, like, user experience you get with Docker files when you can write something and try it out and it fails or passes, and then you can try something else, and you sort of more or less have clues for where you go. And it'd be really nice to see that in the Buildpacks ecosystem. And it has to be different enough, right? So that it doesn't just feel like a minor improvement. It has to feel like a paradigm shift in user experience for how you build containers. So that's the overall idea, and the interaction mode is my hat in the ring, but that's my thoughts.
Cool. I really like that framing of making this experience feel like a paradigm shift in building containers. Folks want to jump in and comment more, or if not, I'll keep moving. Mritunjay, hope I got that.
Hello,
approximately
hello
right.
everyone. Yeah, I'm a new person to the community, so I was just trying to learn how you all are interacting and what we are discussing. And like Yale said, if I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, like it can even I felt a little difficulty in the beginning. However, now I have started practicing the tutorials, and I built my first application through Buildpacks, running that Maven application of Java that was mentioned in the tutorial. So that was easy for me. And one of my friend, she is also new to the community, and I introduced her through by telling her to join the community through LFX mentorship program. So she is also applying, and she also went through the same docs. So initially it was difficult for her as well, but later on she followed the docs and it was building. So it is a little difficult for, especially for students who are still in college, who are still learning the things. But as of now, like right now, while I was going through Miro, so Miro was also new for me, and I mistakenly touched the sticky note, and thank God Natalie fixed that again. So yeah, I was trying to actually just get involved and just observe things for now, because understanding most of the things were little difficult for me. And I also wanted to discuss my previous work, but today it was not in the agenda, so I will discuss in DM with Joe. I was working on a pull request, so I have a few doubts related to that, so I will discuss that later in DM with Joe. Thank you so much.
Normally our office hour is a bit more open-ended, discussing whatever questions people bring. This was a special one, so you got an interesting first office hours experience.
Yeah. My apologies for that. Please ping us in the Slack as well, but also next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming, so it'll be a great place to come and talk about questions. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Getting pretty close to time here. I want to give Dan a chance to speak.
Yeah. So I have one that I wrote down, which is focus on users that we can capture right now, right? And I think after looking over a bunch of the feedback from this, it's like there's a lot of feedback around the difficulties or adopting this, particularly just as like a dev in maybe a smaller shop where the functionality you get out of like rebase, et cetera, is not immediately useful, or like can't be leveraged to the same extent, or you don't have like a dedicated team just managing your platform. And so feel like there's some people that are much easier to capture. And once we can kind of like get this ball rolling and get more Buildpack involvement, more people authoring Buildpacks, that some of these other users might have their reservations about adoption kind of fixed for them, right?
I think that's super interesting. how do we potentially make, some startups, for example, talk about like a beachhead market. I know we have obviously a very ambitious project, but it would be cool to maybe consider that in certain ways. Natalie, you want to round us out? Do you have something you wanted to mention, or any closing words to offer us? We're not getting the audio.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. Very quickly, I added a sticky around like what could we do next? I mean, I personally found a lot of value out of just talking to people, even outside of this more structured user interview project, just in Slack, someone's having a problem, hopping on a Zoom with them for a few minutes and seeing how they actually use our product and some of the things that they are thinking about that wouldn't have ever occurred to me. So I'm really wondering about, what will we do to foster a culture of talking to our users in the Buildpacks project, beyond this sort of initiative that we've been working on. So I would we're at time, but I would invite anyone who's interested in that to please join us in the learning sub-team sync. I think user research has a home there, and we can hopefully strategize as to, how we can keep these kinds of conversations, these kinds of learnings happening.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And with that to close us out, I wanted to ask, is anybody interested in helping to spearhead or to participate in some future research, whether that's usability test or some sort of broader, more exploratory thing like this?
Yeah, I would be.
Dan?
Same here.
Awesome. I'm seeing Dan, Emily. Was there somebody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I raised my hand.
I said some here.
Dan, Emily, Al, Terrence. Amazing. Great. Well, maybe again to talk about what that might look like. In the meantime, thank you all so much for all your support through this process. We couldn't have done without you, and I hope that it's been valuable for everyone.
Has been.
Thank you very much for organizing it.
Thanks so much.
Talk soon. Bye.